somebody wrote into the Money-Wise advice column, and they said, when my parents died, I inherited their wealth, but I also inherited their financial advisor. He's been managing their money pretty well, but his fee is 1.75%. So on the $670,000 that we receive from our parents, we are paying $11,900 a year for that privilege. She wants to know if she should fire her financial advisor. Greg, what do you see?
So whenever you make any purchasing decision, right, it comes down to two things. It comes down to what are you paying and what are you getting? It's very simple. And to figure out if you're overpaying, the easiest thing to do is to start evaluating what other people are paying, right? That's fair. So I looked up on smartasset.com, and they had I don't know how to pronounce it. In 2024, they did a KITS, I think it's KITCS study across the country. And they found that the median fee was 1%. So of everybody in America, they're paying roughly 1%, which we all knew it's a pretty common number. And then for the people that charged hourly, the average financial advising fee was $300 an hour. So that should be the flat line for everyone to say, all right, if that's the average, the only reason I'm going to pay more is that I'm going to get more. I'm going to get something that no one else can provide. And I think that's how people should go about evaluating any decision when they're purchasing. And don't kid yourself, this is the most important financial decision you'll make in your entire life, is turning over your life savings to a financial advisor. So when I start thinking of, they're paying 1.75, they're paying $11,900. So the first thing I want to do is let's divide that by 300 an hour. So that means that in theory, I should be getting 39.6 hours of work a year.
That makes you laugh.
Oh my gosh. Do you really think this dude is spending a full work week on your case? At most, let's just break this down. This is comical, right? Because most of these people have like 500 clients. So it's basically mathematically impossible for them. If you ask them how many clients they have, you can start there too. That's an easy way, because they're so silly. They'll brag about it. I got 500 clients. And you're like, impossible to give me any hours of service a year. Because at 500 clients, you got 2,000 hours in a workable year, assuming you work Fridays, which many of them don't. So start discounting the actual workable hours in a week. And you're like, oh my gosh, what are they really doing? They're probably spending a couple meetings with you, a couple calls. If you're lucky, in my opinion, and this is a guess, you're getting 10 hours. You're getting probably 10 hours of dedicated time if you're lucky. And those 10 hours, think about it, that means they're prepping for your case for a half hour, another, 2 meetings a year. Most people only get one though. And then what are they doing? They probably have an auto allocation that they're working on your case and maybe doing some draws or filling out some paperwork or doing some tax stuff for you for a couple hours a year. So at a couple hours, if you're getting 10 hours, to me, that looks like the fee should be $3,000, not $12,000 or $11,900. So it's hard for me to get my hands around this. And I know this is very disruptive and most people don't talk about this, but it is important. It's important to start thinking, how should I be paying? What should I be paying? Because it's nerve-wracking. 1.75% is very high, right? That seems like a high number. I also think it's interesting that they qualified that their advisor's doing pretty well. So unfortunately, and if you're a retiree, I don't mean to pick on you, but you're picking the wrong stuff to decide how people are doing well. Pretty well means I'm getting a lot of services, not my money grows. Here's a hint. That financial advisor has nothing to do with your money growing, right? Like that's the big thing. It's like, well, they put their money in the market. Well, the market went up. And every financial advisor put the money in the market. And because America's S&P's grown, whatever it is, 200% over the last 10 or 11 years, that doesn't mean your financial advisor is great. That means America's great. And American companies are great. And they're just riding the wave. What pretty well means to me is maybe they're doing some tax services. They're doing an IRA tax plan. Maybe they're doing your tax returns. Maybe they're facilitating legal. Maybe they actually do some cash flow for you. Maybe they help you plan some vacations. Maybe they do some things that actually involve work. Doubt it. I doubt it. But that to me means my financial Sherpa is doing pretty well. And if they're not, they're probably sitting back managing. You guys would be surprised. If you ask your financial advisor, it won't be uncommon for them to say, I have 250 to 500 clients. And mathematically, that's almost impossible for them to justify the fees in which they're charging. It just doesn't go together. So to help people out, Randy, a lot of times when we start this journey, because let's be honest, everybody loves their financial person when the stock market's going up. Everybody, Jim's such a good guy. Chip's such a winner. Susie's great. It's like, okay, that's nice. They're always They're members of 42 churches and 37 organizations in every town, and they're always smiling and taking people out to coffee and lunches and all that fun stuff. But when it really comes down to their not relationship management activities, they usually fall short. That's just the reality in terms of services. So we're not saying you made a bad decision. We're saying you're part of a bad system. So it's hard to show people what they pay because they're defensive. They're like, they feel like they made a bad decision. They feel like, no, everybody does this. Like, this is a bad thing that's been going on for a long time. It's like when everyone was smoking cigarettes and everybody said it was good for you, until someone finally figured out, like, actually, this stuff causes cancer. No one knew, right? What they say, like, I'm making up the statistics, but it was like 77% of people were smoking, pregnant wives were smoking back in the 60s. It just was a thing, and they didn't realize it was bad for you. Well, I'm going to have an attorney general, unfortunately, can't say the financial advisors are bad for your financial health. And I don't have that sticker, but if I did, I'd smack it on the back of their t-shirts or when they're walking by, because I think it would help people to understand, like, this is probably not where you want to spend a lot of your hard-earned life savings, is paying for their second home down in Florida. So the fee analysis that we run, and they'll never know, people freak out. They won't know that we run it. We do it off the statements. We'll show you what you're paying your advisor and what you're paying for your investments. And a lot of times it's more than 2%, because you have 1% going to the advisor, another 1% going for the investments. So you add it all up and it breaks it down what they're paying. We also pair the performance with it, so you can see what the performance is. So you can see the net effect. Is the extra more expensive investments getting the higher returns? You can run that analysis. But at the end of the day, you need data to make good decisions. So our commitment to the retirement community is like, let's just get them the data, and we'll do it at no cost. It's part of every roadmap we do. Our fee analysis is a huge part of that. And it requires software. It's sad. You can't figure it out on your own statements unless you go through the prospectuses and do the math yourself. So this is an easy shortcut for people to understand exactly what they're paying very quickly for their life savings in retirement.
Most of us have investments. Do you know what you're paying for that? Some of you have a financial advisor. Do you know what you're paying for that? Right down to the penny. Probably not, because that's not how this system works. Anytime I bring up Warren Buffett and what Warren Buffett is doing and what Warren Buffett is saying, many times people will say, yeah, well, I'm not Warren Buffett. I don't have all those zeros in back of my name. Well, that's true. But when you look at what he's doing with his business, sometimes we might be able to get a little clue here. Over the last couple of years, Warren Buffett has been decreasing his risk in stocks and now has $344 billion in cash and cash equivalents. It's as if he is getting ready for something. He's protecting his money. Greg, is that any kind of a clue to us to say, if Warren Buffett is pulling back on risk, maybe I should too? Do we look at that kind of stuff?
Yeah, Randy, I was starting a fire, and my daughter was waving a towel, and I was trying to read the smoke signals too of what the financial gods were going to do next week. So,
okay,
yeah, me and Warren, we got our finger on the pulse of the future. I mean, it's been a decade. I don't know. Like, somebody smart said, hey, the economics of America have been backwards for a while. There's a lot of dry powder. Interest rates have been artificially low, making crappy businesses last too long, and they're all going to crash. Private equity's running out of rope. I mean, there's a lot of bad facts, but there've been bad facts for 5 years, right? 5 or 6 years we've had bad facts. So is it really, reading the tea leaves, or is it just, a little bit of a hedge? When you've got billions of and a lot of rich people's money, you can tell a story about anything if you're Warren Buffett. I would prefer to take a more prescriptive and pragmatic approach to my retirement, because, I think the warning signs are great, because Warren does it. People will start listening. I think that's the only positive here. Whether he's right or wrong, flip a coin, right? That's kind of up to the financial gods. But when it comes to really evaluating market risk, I think financial industry professionals have it completely wrong. And they've always had it completely wrong, because they're benchmarking people's life savings against Warren Buffett or against this, the S&P or the NASDAQ or the Dow. And when in reality, they should be trying to explore, what are you actually doing in retirement? And maybe we should actually build a risk profile based on that, because most people's retirements that we're going to talk about later in the show and the amount they spend doesn't justify arguably any risk. Kind of like the old pensions, right? The old pensions had it figured out. And I'm not saying you shouldn't make some money, but like, not at the expense of you sacrificing anything you have to do in retirement. Like, to me, that is the ultimate litmus test, is like, I'll take some risks, but no more risks than I have to that could ever end up with me compromising me not wanting to do everything I want in retirement. And the reason's simple. The extra 10% return is not going to affect your retirement at all. But a 40% loss will be devastating to most people's retirement plans for the next 20 or 30 years. So the risk reward is not there. Now, people start to forget all those because after 10 or 11 years of making, double digit returns, they start to get a little greedy, or they get a little lazy, or a little bit of all of the above. So our approach is a little different. I think when we start thinking through how we plan for retirees, we're like, well, what do you want to do? How much money do you have? What are you actually doing and spending? And then we back our way into it and say, this is silly. Why in the world would we be chasing returns that mean nothing to us? And it's not like it's generational wealth. We're not talking about people that have $20 million that can afford to lose $5 million on a down market. We're talking about people that have $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and then all of a sudden they lose a third of it or half of it. And it's like, well, shoot, that really changes the outlook on that place we were going to get in Florida, or, those trips we were going to go on over the course of Europe, or the grandkids spoiling stuff. And all of those things change. And to me, I never understood why, as a estate planning attorney, sitting across the table for all those years, hearing families. I mean, I saw a full grown man cry in 2010 and 11. Like I'll never forget, he was like a lumberjack. And he was bawling because he was embarrassed because he had worked 30 years and put his money in, the stock market. And that was right at the subprime, crash. And they didn't think they were going to make it. They're like, I have to go back to work, Greg. I've worked my whole life. Now I have to go back. And it was like completely heartbreaking. I think it just shaped me, right? That changed how I felt about investments. It wasn't a numbers game. It's a life game. And because it was a life game, we have to reinvent it, because the industry's got people obsessing and chasing things they don't need, and they charge them for things they don't need. So when we started building Golden Reserve, we started to think about that. Well, what services do people really need? Well, they need tax services. They need legal services. They need life services and some investment stuff to get there, but they don't need in the traditional financial planning model, it's all investments. So our market risk report, Randy, I think is the barometer that people start with, just to see, hey, what percentage of my assets are at risk? It's easy, right? What percentage are at risk? And, what does that mean in dollars? And most people are like, oh, I got 40% at risk. Okay, that's great. What does that even mean? I have 40%, or I have 100%. A lot of people, almost all their money's in the stock market. I got 98%. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let's show you what your holdings did in 2022. Let's show you what your holdings did in 2010. Will that be the same? No, of course not. But at least it gives you some gauging factor of what downside looks like. Well, it looks like, Randy, you'd lose $782,000. Are you comfortable losing $782,000 at age 65?
No.
You're like, no, I'm not comfortable. Well, that's where you're stuck. That's what would have happened if 2010 happens again, or if 2022 happens again, or whatever the magic, and that's the whole point, is to kind of give you some dollar reference, because financial advisors purposely talk in percentages. They charge in percentages, and they talk about risk in percentages, and they talk about risk in terms of percentages. Why? Because people don't think in terms of percentages, right? Like, it's the easiest way to mislead them, or to get them to not focus on it. Hey, we're down 15%. Okay. Hey, we lost $817,000 of your dollars. Like, it feels different. It feels a lot different when you give them dollars. And that's why the financial industry doesn't talk in dollars. They know that it would be disruptive. So that's another reason the market risk report is such a great tool. We do it at no cost. It's part of every roadmap, Randy. And everyone should start there understanding how fast they're driving in retirement before it's too late.
When you think about your risk tolerance, I mean, every financial advisor is going to try to go put you some kind of a scale or something like that. But what if they looked at you and said, how far can you go without losing your 1 month in Florida? How much risk do you want to take without being able to go golfing twice a week or 3 times a week? If it did that to you, would you take that risk? What a different way to look at it. And maybe that's the way you should look at it. And let's have that conversation. Give us a call at Golden Reserve, and we'll talk about market risk and taxes and fees and long-term care and income, all the things that you're going to be dealing with as you move your way into your retirement years. And they're a little bit different than they are in your working years. Here's our website, getyourroadmap.com. Getyourroadmap.com. Okay, one of the big questions people walk through the door with is, did I do enough? Greg, did I save enough for retirement? Because you're getting into a place where you're leaving your job, you don't know what your paycheck is. That's part of what we do, is figure out exactly what your income is for retirement. But how much do you need? According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, here's some numbers that might help. The average spend for a household, and the people are aged 65 to 74, is $5,400 a month. For people 75 and older, it's $4,400 a month. There are only about 3% of us that are spending more than $7,000 a month. You think you need $10,000 a month? Maybe you don't. And the average Social Security benefit for a couple in retirement is $3,000 a month. So, Greg, getting from $3,000 to $5,400 or a little bit more just doesn't seem that hard to me. If you've been a saver, we should be able to do this. And that's got to take a little bit of the anxiety out of this when you start to break down those numbers.
It does, as long as you turn off the TV, the internet, the radio, and everybody telling you you're going to run out of money, right? Like the inflation, the cost of living, all the nonsense that you hear time over time. I think these numbers are great. And to be honest, these are the secret sauce to happiness and retirement, and no one talks about them. And the reason no one talks about them is because it would really marginalize your traditional financial advisor. It would say, you would be like, why do I need you? I think that's the magic. No one wants to play this statistic because you're going to keep hearing those same 5 words. Why do I need you? And let me explain to you the math of why you wouldn't need them. If this is all retirement was about, you rattled off 5,400. So that's $64,800 a year. That's if, from 65 to 75, the median. If you're over 75, it drops down. People do less. That makes sense, right? That's 52,000-ish a year. Now, if you're in the top 3% of spenders in retirement, top 3% in America, according to this article, you're at $84,000 a year. You know what I'm going to do, Randy? These people here, let's charge it up. Let's go to 100. Let's do 100,000 a year. Let's be crazy. Let's get crazy. So we go to $100,000 a year. Let's do some simple math. Just some old arithmetic. If you got $1 million and you're playing it real safe and you're in bonds or CDs or money markets, or you're doing all this very, very annuities, you got really, let's say you're making a very simple 5% a year. That's a very, very, that's like half what the market's averaged in the last 10 years ish, right? Like you've been seeing double-digit returns. So let's just split it in half over the last decade. And so now you're at 5% and you're making $1 million, you have $1 million and you're getting $50,000 a year. That's 5% of $1 million, easy math. And to your point, Social Security is roughly 30 grand. Mm-hmm. I saw an article too, Randy, that said 32 grand. You said 36 grand, whatever it is. Let's just say it's 30-ish. So we're at 82,000. We're at top 3%. So I got a crazy idea here. What if we spent some of our principal? Oh my gosh. What if we actually spent some money we spent 30 years saving? The world would end. No, let's see. At that rate of $20,000, you would only last, Randy, you'd only last another 50 years.
Oh, wow.
Only another 50 years. And that's assuming you kept spending $100,000 a year. So I think that begs the question, the 5 words I said earlier, why do I need you? Why do I need a financial advisor? And if they're just saying they're beating the stock market, you probably don't. You probably don't. Or I wouldn't say you probably don't. I would say they're not worth the fees they're charging. That's probably a better way of paying. They're not worth 1%. They're not worth, $1 million. Are they worth, is that worth $10,000? Like that seems pretty steep. So I think what's happening, Randy, is everyone's copying us. That's right. Golden Reserve. The whole nation is racing to be us. We were first to market. We were the iPhone. Golden Reserve was the iPhone. I am completely comfortable. People are so lazy, they actually even put mountains on their website, and everyone's using Roadmap now. Like it's a race to chase and be Golden Reserve across the country because we have the tax team, we have the legal team. And it's not like some weird one-off grandpa attorney. Like we got an attorney. Yeah. Uncle Bill, who's 82, that just happens to return your phone call once every 20 years. No, we have a law firm that actually supports like 6 states, right? Like that's the kind of services we have. We have a tax, a tax firm that actually does tax returns across the U.S. Like we actually have real functioning, professional companies that we've partnered with over the years that provide more than just investment advice. And I think people are realizing that's where the value is. Being able to get through those tax returns, being able to get through those legal plans to update your an asset protection trust that protects you from long-term care, nursing home. All of these things are where values. What about someone that helps you plan your vacations? How about someone that shows you how to spend your money? Wouldn't that be weird to have a retirement planner that actually helps you spend your money in retirement in ways that are meaningfully and strategically built into your plan. Because our income forecast, Randy, believe it or not, we never build income plans. I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money. You're a grown up. You've lived your whole life and saved all this money. You don't need me to tell you how to budget. That's ridiculous. You've raised kids. You paid for college tuitions. What you do need is a gas tank. So our income forecast projects your income and your spending from last year based on your money on a 5% growth rate for 25 years forward to show you what's left. And you can see if you're on E, you're on full. And here's a hint. Most years it gets bigger for all of our clients. And that's not because we do anything special. It's because people are too scared to spend their money. So if you can get people into the mode of spending more money and having more fun and building more memories, they're happier, they're living a more fulfilled life. They're doing all the things that retirement's supposed to be versus staring at like glossy charts and being scared because the cost of bacon went up this year. Like it doesn't make any sense. That's the magic of the income forecast. And not only will we do it if you come get a roadmap, but we'll update it for you every year if you become a client, Randy.
Isn't that why you go into retirement, is to enjoy that money that you've been saving all these years? That's what we have as a goal at Golden Reserve. Okay, there's a lot of rules of thumb out there when it comes to retirement planning. And according to a new study, a lot of people aren't buying into them anymore because we've talked about these things, 60-40 portfolio, 4% rule, all these different things that used to work but apparently don't work anymore or don't work as well anymore. Only 35% of us believe that the 4% withdrawal rule still works. 53% say the 100 minus your age risk formula doesn't work anymore. And 64% of people say that retiring at age 65 doesn't work anymore. However, 84% of financial advisors are still committed to the 4% rule, and 73% still use the 100 minus your age should be where your risk formula is. So, Greg, it appears that financial advisors are stuck in the past. We are moving on. There seems to be a problem here.
Yeah, I mean, in most things in life, look at the incentives. Right. Look, and that will modify behaviors. Right. If you look at what people are incentivized to do, they will usually do that. It's not an altruistic, candy land of unicorns. I'm riding around on my rainbow. No, that's not how it works. Right. Like it's follow the money. How you get paid? How do you reinforce your value proposition? Well, guess what? When people spend less, like things like the 4% rule, that means the AUM in which they manage gets bigger, which means the financial advisor fee arguably will get bigger, right? It's not rocket science. The bigger the accounts, the more the fee. If you're charging a 1% model, it's just math, right? Like if I don't spend my money, my financial advisor makes more. If I spend my money, my financial advisor makes less. It's inarguable when you're charging a percentage on someone's life savings. To say that that doesn't affect their strategies, their advice, their fear mongering, is just void of reality. Now, whether it's at a subconscious level or it's, actually they are super like real life, self-interested bad person is up for debate, right? Again, only you know that answer as the retiree. But I do think, that's what's driving all these things. These are VCRs, right? This is the VCR age. Remember that top load quasar that always kind of wouldn't go down? You got to slam it twice and then you'd forget to rewind it and then you take it back. The reality is, if you think about the evolution of any industry, it evolves because, there's competitors that are out there trying to think what's happening in life. Is the world of retirement changing? And unfortunately, there's, industries like legal that are protected state to state. There's, industries like the finance that have federal protection where they keep the same system going. It's really hard because of regulation to innovate because you have to do so inside their rules. And what that has caused is, just complete ignoring. Let's think about the 1980s, for example. And all of a sudden, long-term care was $10,000 a year. Now it's $10,000 arguably a month, depending on what facility you're in. That is a substantial change where you used to spend, your risk was $50,000. Now it's $500,000 over 5 years. That is a monumental shift in retirement, yet the industry has come up with no solutions. What about IRA taxation? Back then, the IRAs didn't come out until the 80s. So there was none. They had no tax plan. People weren't retiring with IRAs because they didn't exist. 1978 is when the 401k came about, and it didn't really get implemented and rolled out until the 80s. So you didn't have to worry about these large 401ks or IRAs being rolled over where you had to think through what are the tax consequences if I don't plan for this during my life? What if I just take the RMDs? Is that the right thing to do? All of these things changed, yet the financial industry keeps putting the VCR into the top load and pushing it down and hitting play and just saying, no, this is what you have to watch. And I think my book, Fire Your Financial Advisor, was built on us kind of highlighting all the things that were wrong in the financial industry in the first half. And in the second half, providing solutions. Like, here's where this should go. Here's how we should attack long-term care. Here's how we should attack taxes. Here's how we should attack fees. Here's how we should actually charge people in retirement. And oh, by the way, what about let's evolve the industry to help them enjoy their money? Like, wouldn't it be more fun to help people spend their money versus just invest it? And I think that's the big aha moment in our book, Randy, where we're really trying to change an industry when we're going up against, like you said, 95% of the country, charging 1% fees and doing all the old VCR stuff. We're trying to get people to stream. Like, let's hop on Netflix, man. You can watch whatever you want. It's faster, it's easier, it's better, it's cheaper, it's more economical. You'll be happier. And I think that is the fight we're in now for our financial future in our lives is trying to find ways to disrupt and beat an industry that has unlimited resources. Everyone's against us. It's David versus Goliath. And that's what we're up against. That's what Golden Reserve is fighting against right now, to try to find ways to help retirees. And we can't do it without you, right? Like, hopefully if you want to, check out our book, Fire Your Financial Advisor, when you schedule an appointment, we send you a free copy, but it tells the story in the way that I tell stories, with a lot of 80s references and 90s references, to hopefully make it enjoyable, but also explain where, essentially the financial industry has left retirees behind and not evolved and taken care of them, and actually exploited them in a lot of ways, Randy, and haven't been doing the work to keep addressing, modern 2025 issues of retirement.
That book is really the impetus of what we do here on the radio and what Greg does on TV, and just getting the word out that this industry that you're kind of thrust into at this point in your life, there's some things that you need to know about it. And we point these things out every single week. If you want a copy of the book, again, if you take us up on the roadmap, everybody gets a copy of the book. GetYourRoadmap.com. Again, GetYourRoadmap.com. So chances are you've got an IRA or you've got a 401k. That's where they've told us to save our money all these years to get ready for retirement. And then you find once you start using that money, every time you use it, it's like going to a toll booth. You have to pay the taxes before you use your own money. Well, the Wall Street Journal did an interesting story, and they said if you do that conversion that we talk about, IRA or 401k, over to a Roth, putting you in a lower tax bracket can extend your portfolio longevity by 7 years. That's significant. Greg, does it make that big a difference? Have you found that kind of math? That seems crazy to me.
Can we talk about portfolio longevity? What a silly term. Are they serious?
It's all financial
longevity,
talk.
huh? Is that what we're calling it? Is that code for running out of money?
Running out of money. Yeah.
Is that what they're saying? Because
that's what they're saying.
I don't see very many studies. When was the last article you saw of a bunch of people underneath an overpass that said my portfolio longevity was 7 years short?
I've not seen that sign. No,
I don't see that. So I don't know. Like, this seems goofy. Do I think people should do tax planning? Of course. It's a huge part of what we do. I think this is the lowest hanging fruit out there. When I was a estate planning attorney, Randy, don't tell anybody. I know I said it again, the A word. I was an attorney. I'm sorry.
Don't tell anybody.
I still am an attorney. But, when we practice, the unique part about being an attorney is that you get access to different parts of people that you would never get in a financial advising relationship, at least in my opinion, when it's very transactionally and it's very sales oriented. And when people come and meet a attorney, it's different. There's a reverence. I know it sounds strange, but there's this safety haven. When the door shuts, people tell you everything. They really do. It's a very different experience. I've listened in. My advisors on the financial side run meetings, and I've obviously sat through thousands of legal meetings. It's different. And what that has given me is a very unique perspective to see how people understand and how they think about their money, how they think about taxes, and how they think about investing. And the reality is no one has any idea what their money is invested. Like, if you ask people, what do you invest in? They're like, I don't know, Chip knows. Like, the majority of people aren't like, well, I got this much in large cap and small cap. Of course, the engineer knows that. We all know the engineer friend that has a separate spreadsheet in addition to his statements. But for everyone else, they don't really, it's more about the relationship and the macro. So when we started diving into this, we said, what are you doing about taxes? Because, we weren't getting into the investments at that time. When I was obviously doing the estate planning, I'd say, well, I think part of the estate planning is the tax planning. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm not joking. I don't know if anyone had a tax plan back then, back in 2010 and even 2015. We weren't hearing a lot of people being like, well, I got to really de-tax my IRA. Everyone's like, well, I guess I'm just going to wait till I'm 70 and a half. Because that was back then, that was the RMD age. 70.5 is when you had to start taking it out. It's changed up years, 71, 73 is going to go to 75. And that was, their tax plan was literally to do what Uncle Sam said. And I always kind of grinned and I always said, when you have an IRS problem, would you call Uncle Sam and ask for tax advice? And they'd just kind of smile and they're like, no. I'm like, well, then why are we using his plan for your largest financial asset a lot of the time? A lot of times that is their largest financial asset. We look at all these balance sheets, it was the big one. It was the IRA or the 401k they'd saved for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. And when we broke it down, I said, listen, if we actually, you're retired, you haven't turned Social Security on yet, you could probably get away with, starting to take some money out of here and using that to supplement your Social Security, let your Social Security grow at 8%. And, you could actually do this. And those conversations were very interesting because most people, the thought of paying taxes was like a non-starter. I'm not, Craig, what's this guy talking about? He's crazy, and I'd be like, well, you got to pay it no matter what anyways. It's just a question of when and how much, right? Everyone knows that. You're going to have to pay tax on these IRAs and this qualified money and 401ks. It's just a question of what percentage you have to pay and obviously how much. So if you have $1 million IRA, you can pay $150,000 or you can pay $400,000. It's up to you. And if you have your plan, the chances of you minimizing those taxes is a lot more likely. If you just use Uncle Sam's plan and just cross your fingers and then your spouse passes and then it goes to your kids and your kids just take it out and buy a place in Florida, you're probably going to pay more taxes than you need to. And that really started to resonate over time. It took a while, Randy. Believe it or not, a lot of people were like, I don't believe you, Greg. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. It's just math, right? You have to take money out. The more you take out, it's going to bump you into higher tax rates. What happens is when you die, because you as the husband probably going to die first. Sorry, bad news, fellas, but that's just the statistical probability. Well, your spouse then has to take the same amount of these RMDs, but now she's at the single rate, not the couple rate. So that's a higher tax rate. So that overnight, your taxes could increase by 10, 15% on these RMDs. And then when it goes to your kids, it's at your kids' tax rates, not your tax rates. And I think that's the aha, where it's like, oh, you mean it's not my, no. They don't get the benefit of your lower tax rates. It's usually the kids' highest earning tax rates. So if they're in the 30s or even as high as 39.9%, some of the highest brackets, and that's before state taxes, by the way. I'm just talking about Fed tax. We're not even talking about state taxes on these things, depending on where you live. So this was the conversation we were having with people, and we ended up building tools to help people basically figure out how to optimize these tax draws. And whether you convert it to a Roth or you just de-tax it and take it out, we just did the math for them and say, listen, every year we're going to manage this. We're going to take out X% a year. Usually it's 7 to 10 years. That's like the average in our world. That's what we see is where most tax savings happen. And as you defund this, IRA and put it in after-tax dollars or Roth dollars, so it's growing tax-free, you're paying the taxes on your terms, not Uncle Sam's. And that's how you should view it. I can use Uncle Sam's plan, or I could have my own plan. And I'm going to have my own plan, and I'm going to control my life and one of my largest assets, hopefully, on how it's going to be taxed. I know it's not fun to pay taxes, folks, but it has to be done. And we have to be a grown up here and have those conversations. And most financial industry folks ignore them because no one wants to tell their client to pay tax. But the secret is paying tax is how you beat Uncle Sam when it comes to IRA tax dollars. And that's why a tax audit is part of every roadmap we build. We actually give you an introductory one showing you a rough outline of what your tax plan would look like in retirement based on your income, based on your IRA size and all that fun stuff. We build it for you. And then if you become a client, we update it every year for growth and changes in tax laws and all that fun stuff, Randy. But it's low hanging fruit where you can save not just tens, but possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars based on your tax bracket and your IRA size.
You think about your whole life and how you try to save money. You look for sales. You do your research when you buy a car or a computer to get the best possible price. You use Amazon Prime and all these different things so you don't overpay. Well, when you get into retirement, why would you not do the same thing? Why would you overpay in taxes? You don't have to. Let's sit down and do the math, and we'll do the IRA tax plan for you. One of the great comedy routines of all time was George Carlin's A Place for My Stuff.
That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. It's all your house is. It's a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. Now, sometimes you've got to move. You got to get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff.
That was always a good one. But Greg, that is one thing that we have to talk about when we have a retirement meeting. Where's my stuff going to go? You have material stuff, you have financial stuff, and you want to make sure that it goes in the right place. And sometimes that means having a pretty serious conversation and putting some legal papers in place. And I think it's important to talk about this every now and then, because this might be the one thing. You may have a financial advisor, you may be happy, everything's going along good, but you don't have anything going on in your life with taxes, and you don't have an estate plan. So let's talk about some of the things that you do for people at Golden Reserve.
Absolutely. So we are biased. A lot of us are attorneys by nature and estate plan attorneys. So we understand the importance. And here's why I think there's a disconnect between the financial industry and the, legal aspect of retirement. And it's because in most cases, the money goes to the kids, and the kids have their own financial professionals, and they don't see what happens. They don't get to see the full movie. Imagine watching a movie, Randy, and being like, I missed the last 20 minutes of every movie I watch.
Not good.
And, a lot of time that's when the big things happen, the scary things, the sad things, the happy things. Anything that happened that is important is usually the climax of the crescendo moment at the end of a movie. And, that gets missed by the financial industry because they're not part of it, because they know that there's probably a not great likelihood that they're going to inherit the account. So it just gets transferred. They get an ACAP form. Next thing you know, the money's gone and they're off to the next, family. Whereas with estate planning attorneys, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess in some ways, we're part of the worst days of everyone's life, period. Believe it or not, we are the first or second phone call when someone goes in a nursing home, and we are the first or second phone call when someone dies. And then not only that, but we are with them whether they're applying for Medicaid or they're running out of money and they're trying to traverse the complicated skilled facility care, nursing home situation. And we're trying to help family members with the powers of attorney and all the different, living wills and all those things. And then when someone passes, we're navigating the trust administration or the probate work and the distribution of assets. So we can see when stuff gets screwed up. I mean, that's the short of it. And this is the end of retirement mountain. People plan on going up retirement mountain in the working years. They get to the top, they choose a guide to get them down. A lot of times the guide that got you to the top won't be the right guide to get you down. We talk about that all the time at Golden Reserve because the air is different. The life's different. The way you navigate, what you need is different. The way you invest is different. And you need someone that specializes. That's why Golden Reserve only works with retirees. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but we don't. We don't work with anyone in their 30s and their 40s, when it comes to financial planning, because our services are built for retirees. Our people are built for working with retirees. Our experiences with retirees. So we understand all the nuanced differences. So when we're working with our attorneys to figure out how estate planning should work, we're talking about getting the foundation right. So there's different stages of estate planning. There's the I'm retired. Usually when I'm retired, it's usually the second life event when you talk to an attorney, ignoring when you buy a house. The first is when you have kids and you need to get the guardianship papers together. And the second is, wow, I'm retired. All my documents haven't been touched for 20 years. I probably should do something. And that's when the estate planning attorneys get involved. And that's where we, hopefully help you navigate. Do you want a revocable trust that avoids probate with trust distributions? Do you want an asset protection trust that protects some assets from the nursing home for your spouse and for your kids? Do you want both? How does that navigate? And to do that, we just include it as part of, a lot of our fees in planning, because we think that if we remove all the barriers, people do these things, and they're very important, right? It doesn't do any good to have a great investment plan if your assets don't go where you want, if they go to the daughter-in-law or the son-in-law that you don't want, or, if they go to the wrong, in the wrong pace, they overpay too quickly, or they pay they pay over a long period of time and no one gets to use the money. So navigating the distribution patterns, Randy, is a huge part of getting the plan right. And it's why it's addressed in every client that we bring on has legal support a lot of times down the hallway. A lot of our attorneys are down the hallway, and the ones that aren't down the hallway are just a phone call away or can come by, because we think, having that access to the legal piece is just as important as the finance piece, just as important the tax piece. You got to have all three parts of that trilogy to make a retirement plan work effectively. And when it comes to estate planning, where your stuff goes, it can really screw it up. If you don't have, maybe you want to go to your grandkids, you want to skip generations, you want to give it different percentages, you want delays. You should know all the options when it comes to a lifetime of work on how you should distribute your assets, Randy. And that's why it's part of every roadmap we build and part of every golden reserve plan in which we execute.
Well, Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And when you look at what you're paying right now, what kind of services are you getting? Are you getting tax services? Are you getting estate planning services? Do you have attorneys working for you with wills and trusts? And this is all a part of that retirement umbrella that we talk about. Well, Greg does not have a T-shirt that says this, but he should, because he says it all the time. Make your retirement exciting and make your investments boring. Boring is better. Why? Why do we have to shoot for the moon? Why not 4 or 5%, which is usually just fine for most retirees? Well, I bring you to this Bankrate.com article that talked about the fear of the market crashing, where it says, embrace the boring. There is nothing wrong with 4 to 5% returns. So, Greg, they seem to be catching on to the idea that boring is better. We don't have to use hedge funds and use high-flying investments in order to make our retirement work. Sometimes it's just basic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, Randy. I mean, if you're going on an African safari with a bunch of retirees, that feels exciting and crazy. Or a Oktoberfest tour, or an Alaskan tour, or an out west in Sedona, or you're climbing a mountain, or you're hiking, or you're doing that. Sounds exciting. Does large cap dividend funds sound exciting? Is that the things that get you really pumped up? Like, can't wait for the S&P quarterly return statements. Can't wait for Powell and the Fed to tell me the next interest rate bump. Like, sounds like a pretty not exciting way to spend your time. And, you know, I've said it before, and I think people misunderstand it. Like, we want people to make money, right? If there's money to be made, you know, when people say, well, what does it mean? Golden Reserve traditionally basically has different approaches to investments, but we have money in the stock market just like everybody else. We have money in safe, but we always want to make sure we take a pragmatic approach to this, right? Like, we're not telling you not to make money and not be in the market, but be careful. And if that compromises your goals, you should give it some hard thought. That's really what we're saying, because a lot of times the cost of living, like, I don't know, the cost of living, like, really? What costs so much? Your eggs are an extra $1? Your pizza's an extra $10? Is that really going to stop you from doing everything you want in retirement? Like, it's laughable to say that these things are having any effect on this stuff. Because if you look at the big 4 things that people spend money on as adults, right? You have your home, you have vehicles, you have college tuition for your kids. And then, of course, the 4th one is long-term care or healthcare. Only one of those apply to the retiree population for the most part. And I think that is how you should look at it, is like, well, shoot, I've paid for everything already. Everything, I worked hard, I'm done. I've gone through all the big ticket items except for long-term healthcare. And maybe I have insurance, or I have asset protection trust. I've already got that, and I've got that risk figured out. So then why am I taking risk? You know, why would you drive 95 miles an hour to Kroger's or wherever you're getting your delicious ice cream or double stuffed Oreos? Well, you can get there going 25. Like, you've heard me say that 1,000 times, Randy, but I just don't get it. I don't get why you would take risk without reward, because if there's no reward, why take the risk? You know, there's better ways to get your adrenaline pumping than risking your life savings that you put 30 years into building. Like, do some rappelling. I don't know. Do some, you know, the long distance stuff. I think the kids are calling it cardio. Cardio? Is that what it's called when you're running around? I don't know. Maybe. Never heard of that.
The kids today with the hair and the music.
But I guess, you know, when you build your financial future, it should be predictable. It should be easy to understand, and it should be a little boring. Maybe not all boring, but make it a little boring, please. Make it, if you heard me, if you don't use Golden Reserve or you don't get a roadmap, take one thing away, go make your retirement investment plan just a little bit more boring. And I think you'll be happier to find a little bit more predictability, a little bit more consistent understanding. And you're not at the whim of NVIDIA and Apple and Meta and these tech companies that are going up and down, or the crazy 2025 we've had, where it's been like a roller coaster of who knows what the tariffs are going to do and how it's going to affect the market and how they're going to respond to interest rates. Like, I just don't think your financial future should be dependent on news updates and the S&P. It should be more consistent and stable than that. And I think most people would rather, like I said, pump all the exciting stuff into the trips they take and the memories they build. And you can do that. It's not true. You can make your investments boring and do everything you want in retirement. Almost everyone can, if you just sit down and embrace that philosophy and possibility, versus being put in this complete, model of just risk, mutual funds, stocks. And, you just have to get certain returns to outpace inflation. And then ask your financial advisor when they say that, what am I buying that inflation affects? Could you tell me? Could you tell me why I have to risk $2 million of my life savings to spend $18 extra a year on eggs? It doesn't add up. You can be simpler. You can be more predictable. You can still make money in retirement. But the most important thing is that you're building memories and doing all the things you want in retirement. That's the goal, not a ledger that on your deathbed, you're like, did you see that? I averaged 11% return over the last 30 years. And my grandkids don't talk to me. My kids hate me. Like, you miss the whole point. You miss the whole point of life, right? It's about connections and life and experiences and building relationships that actually matter. So, Randy, hopefully the roadmap for retirement helps people start going down that road to see that there is a different path to view their financial future in retirement.
I think I want to know, and I think most everybody listening wants to know the answer to one question, and that is, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay in retirement? And once we get that answer for you, the next question is probably going to be, can I go do the stuff I want to do? Well, let's get you the answer to that question too. That's what retirement is making memories, not necessarily making money. It's not that we're going to give up the idea of making money, but let's make memories in retirement. Let's give you the funds to do that. Give us a call and let's work through a roadmap for retirement. We'll do that for you at no charge. GetYourRoadmap.com is our website.